Okay, there you go. So, and that's kind of fun, right? Painting for one song and then just stopping. And I love it because I wasn't thinking at all while I was painting that. I was just so in the song and so just in the limited palette. Because in a way, when you're only painting with one range of colors, it is really limited, but it's pretty cool. I love it. But it's still some of those little surprises that you can get that you may see sometimes. That makes a painting. I'm going to bring back the pink palette and see where I want to push it because I need it to go. I mean, I do like the fact that it's just kind of going pink, but I might bring in a few slightly different colors just to make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to put a little bit more crimson-y colors on there. I'm putting some just red. It's called Rose Madder because I want to get slightly more reds in there. And some more of the fluoro onto my palette. And I want to get something a little bit more purpley. I might bring in some of that permanent maroon. Oh, I've got some of that on there anyway. I'm going to bring some sky blue. It's a bit of a purpley blue, but I just need something else to pop. So I'm putting that on there as well. Okay. So because it's working so well for us, I hope you're all enjoying the song and paint. And I hope it helps you get into your painting a little bit too. So we might just do another song and we'll just kind of go full on into our pinks. Okay. How'd you all go? Like for me, I put some purples on there, which is good because I got a bit more color happening on this, but it all started to blend together. So this is part of what happens when we're just kind of letting go and letting whatever happen. So it is where it is.
So I'm back with this painting that I created during the last paint party. And just so that you know, I'm now calling them paint jams. So we come together and we paint together, and I'll share some of the things that that I use in my mentoring sessions and with my students. So please join any paint jam that you see coming up. I do them monthly. There's a few coming up soon, so I'd love you to join the Paint Jam community. I've got a Facebook group, free Facebook group. Just look up Paint Jam Community or Paint Jam with Deni, and I'll get you in the group. This painting here, often when I do paintings over a couple of sessions, my palettes can really transform. So if you were there with me at the paint party, this one was just purely pinks as a beginning. And now I'm starting to develop it in a few different ways. So to do that, I'm bringing in some golds and some greens. And some greys to bring in some muddy tones, some intentional mud, and some darker, deeper purples. This is to get the depth into the colours that I strive for in my work. I love getting some beautiful pastels on there. I enjoy getting some deep, deep colours and then contrasting it with lots of areas of openness and brightness. Already you can see that a lot of my pink earlier layers have been reduced quite a bit by the layers on top, but you can see them peeking through. And, those first layers for me are activating the canvas. They're just a starting point. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where I'm going to get to. You might have seen then that I used some cloths to wipe over some of the thicker paint, and that's created quite a grungy feeling on the canvas, which I don't mind. And I'm coming back over with some of those lilac-y pink tones now, creating a bit more clarity where there's quite a bit of grunge and mess underneath. That pinky purpley tone that I've got there is Really beautiful. I'm enjoying the way that it's dripping, and I'm enjoying the way that colour works with these greener tones. And often that's what I do. I follow the thing that's lighting me up at the time. So if those colours are what I'm enjoying, then you'll see me put a lot more of those onto this palette, onto this painting, and onto my palette. I love that caramel tone with that purple crimson colour. At this point, it feels like a puzzle to me. It's just simply, I try not to get my head too involved in this process. And I try not to get too involved in thinking about a final piece. It's just, I'm playing and then I'm exploring and I'm not attached. I like creating from this non-attached place. It's just allowing the paint to come through me rather than trying to control it. And sometimes that means that I do lots of layers, but I enjoy the process so much that I don't mind. I don't mind how many layers it takes me. That's the joy for me. Sometimes if a painting comes out too quickly, I can be a bit disappointed that it hasn't taken me longer. I enjoy the depth I get through layers. I enjoy the complexity that the work has in it, even if you just see little bits peeking through. And you will see me often working between this very light layer, which I'm putting lots of the light on now. Light brings clarity to the piece. It gives me an idea of where I want to head by giving myself some clear space. And it also helps frame the bits that I'm enjoying. Now I'm really enjoying that colour. The beigey, yellowy gold looks so lovely with the pinks and the whites and the greys. And I love it too when, if you've got a palette, you've got a few colours on there, you've got some transparent paints and you've got some opaque paints, and you get your brush and you gather up quite a bit of both. And you'll see it in some of the strokes on this painting where the colours are blending together and dripping together, and it creates a really beautiful effect. This, you really can't worry about the amount of paint that you use when you're wanting to get these kind of rich colours and complex colours with a few of them coming in together. You can see it in the bottom middle section where I've got some deep rusts and some of that beautiful beige, golden beige colour together in some of the strokes. And you can also see it in that really deep vibrant violety pink at the bottom. There's a little bit of more of a plummy colour that's coming into it, and it just creates a really interesting paint stroke. Certainly against some of the more dull areas of opacity like the greys and the whites. I'm always looking at ways to balance areas by bringing in something that highlights it even more. So if I've got a very dull grey, then I might sit that next to something that's a bit brighter so that the bright colour stands out next to the grey. I also tend to work sometimes very small, and then sometimes when it feels too like I'm getting too, my strokes are getting too small and I'm putting too many little bits onto the painting, I might bring in a bigger brush to contrast it and get something bigger in there. But I'm loving the little puzzle of this painting, the little areas that I'm working on. How can I bring in the colours that I'm loving in different ways that create a nice continuity across the painting, but also little stories in themselves. There's a few too many little stories happening now. So here you see me bringing in some bigger strokes now, some more of the same colour to create a much bigger area so that there aren't as many small little bits in the story. That purpley colour, I don't use a lot of purple. Or haven't recently, but I'm loving it. And now I'm getting an even deeper purple colour that's quite fluidy. I use water to put a lot of fluid into my paints. I don't tend to use the glazing mediums. This is just personal preference. You use what you experiment with them. Use different mediums and see what you think of the way that they affect your colours. I just over time have found that I really enjoy using a lot of water and making a lot of my paints quite fluidy and often more transparent by using water. But there are some disadvantages to that. They can get too fluidy and create too many drips, and you can really lose the paint integrity. So that starts looking like there's water in the paint and it starts losing its vibrancy. It's all about experimenting with what lights you up. So I can show you what I follow and what I do, and you'll find that when you're in your studio and you're doing your paintings that there will be a way that will just light you up more. And you're better to follow that than any other artist. That's going to be part of your unique signature. And experimenting with other people's styles can be a really good way to develop your own. But you'll notice, just follow the things that light you up. I often find that I have a very loose style at times, and then I go into a little bit more of a almost like solving a puzzle. And I enjoy both ways. I think that it's probably the intersection of the two that is my style. I like order and disorder. I like straight lines, but then I also love just letting loose and letting the painting be a lot freer. It's both that light me up, so I follow both. And sometimes I find that I follow one too much and I need to bring the other back in. So the palette's really sorting itself out now. It's quite different than where I started, but I do have those pinks and purples that I had in the original under layers that I've kept because they were the things I enjoyed, but I wanted to develop the palette even further. And I'm enjoying this palette, so I'm going to continue with it. It's just a matter of when does it feel complete. So I'm now bringing in some oil pastel, and you've got to be quite careful when you do bring this in, not to bring it in over too much. Well, for me, it gets too muddy if I bring it in over wet paint. So I try and get my under layers a bit dry before I bring it on. I also I use the oil pastel to get clarity in shapes. So I don't want to bring them in too early. So I've got the green, beautiful Sennelier green that I'm bringing in areas in now. Gives a whole different feeling to the painting, and also those big lines in white. You might notice that flesh-coloured oil pastel that I've got there. It's very much like the paint colour underneath. And I quite like using tonal pastels. I don't tend to go too much out of my palette when I'm adding pastels in. I did bring in a little bit of that bright pink, but it feels a little bit jarring to me with the palette underneath, so I think you'll find that I'll go over that. And often with a palette, when I'm enjoying it and I'm not wanting to go too different, I will just change the colours up tonally a little bit by adding a little bit more white in, or adding some of my colours together. So I might add some of that flesh colour into the green to make a little bit more of a halfway in between colour. And then the palette seems to really blend well together. Now I've put on quite a bit of the light colours, so I'm wanting to get a lot more depth in the purple areas. So this is still, it may look quite black on your screen, but that dark colour is a very deep plum. So as I say, it's still tonal with the colours that are underneath. I'm in this process of subtracting at the moment to see what I want to clarify and see what I'm happy to lose. I often push myself to lose cover over as much as I can. How much do I need to still make the painting interesting for me, rather than what can I add? In those early layers, I add a lot, and then it becomes about clarifying. And you can see in those goldy, greeny areas, I've added a bit more depth of transparent greens in, which again, it's that contrast, the transparent paints contrasting with the opaque paints. Just adding a few more marks in to pull the eye. I like taking my viewers around the painting, so I find different visual ways of leading the viewer around the story of the painting. And that's the mark making for me. I want to show them how I want the painting to be viewed. So I often use my marks as a way of inviting the viewer to look at certain areas in an order. So my lines can take your eye. Well, that's feeling like I'm getting to a point where I feel quite satisfied with where this is. So I'll probably leave it here and see whether it stays at this point.